Last time we have been seeing this probability, like last time we saw some of the things, and today we will see some probabilistic inequalities and examples, and also we'll see why do we need them. Okay. Okay. So if you recall last time, I tried to give you some motivation for looking at probabilistic inequalities. And one such motivation, I tried to tell you a little bit about binomial distribution, which is nothing but if you're going to have an n coin tosses, how many heads do you give? So this gives me a distribution for this object. So now if I have a random variable x, which is like number of heads, right? So it is k with probability n choose k and 1 over 2 power n, okay? And then we saw how does this curve looks like? So we say, look, number of heads could be either 0, or it could be 1, or it could be 2, and we checked what is the probability that x equal to 1. So if we are only doing 2 coin tosses, we saw that it takes 1 with probability half. And why 1 is interesting to us? Because if we talk about the expectation of this random variable x, then we knew that this is exactly equal to n by 2. So if we are going to do 2 coin tosses, the number of heads we will see, like expected number of heads we will see is 1. Then we say, okay, let's see how does this distribution looks like if we throw 4 coins. Then we saw that, well, the probability that we will see 2 coins has come down, but probability that I will see a coin between 1 and 3 seems to be more or less everything that we worried about. Okay, so let's go further. So for example, if I asked you how many heads will we see between, say, if we had 8 coin tosses, and if I showed you this picture and said, hey, can you tell me how many heads will I see between 2 and 6? Then I go here, like, and then so something like this, 6, like, of course I'm not doing very correctly. So notice that this is the probability that you will take values head either 0 and 1 is this probability. This probability. And you will take heads more than 6 heads is this probability, right? So this is like less than 0.1, 0.1. So probability that you will be taking number of heads between 2 and 6 is like roughly more than 0.8, okay? Then we ask ourselves even further. And now if you ask between 4 and 12, like it's even much smaller, right? So what I mean to say that as we increase the number of trials, then the curve starts to look like that more and more chances or more and more probability is there that you are going to take number of heads which are closer to its mean, okay? So this is all that this curve is trying to explain to us. So let's go further. Let's go further, right? So now, basically, now we are doing 256 coins. So what is its median is like 128. And I ask, hey, how many heads are you going to see between 100 and 150? Look, it is almost close to 1. Like and number of heads less than 100, more than 150 is like somewhere here, which is very close to 0 together. And more we take, this gets more and more skewed. So on and so forth, okay? So this is just to give you an example of what does it mean, okay? So this is what I call concentration of mass. So like, okay, fine. I have an expectation. I have done a random experiment and I have an expectation, okay? I would like to know what is the chances that, well, you are going to be close to your expectation. And this is what is known as concentration of mass. And this is a very special case of what is called law of large numbers, okay? So just to concentrate, so this is the curve which I showed you up until now. And now what I'm going to do in the second picture is basically, I'm zooming like in the middle part. So if you zoom in the middle part, okay, this is what it looks like, what is called bell-shaped structure, okay? And now what does law of large number says? That if you have a binomial distribution, then for n large number, everything converges to a Gaussian distribution, and or for our purposes, this bell-like curve, or in other words, the probability that you have most mass closer to its mean, right? Like probability that you have number of heads between some number and some number where the in between you have an expectation is really close to 1. Rest do not count that much. Okay, so this is what informal statement of law of large numbers is. And but what does law of large number does not say? Let's try to understand what does law of large numbers does not say. So if we take many independent trials, okay, of a random variable, okay, many independent trials of a random variable, then the average value taken by these random variables over these trials converges to its expectation. Okay, look, this is not formal statement because then we have to say almost surely and those kind of object, but that is not what I want to say. So what I'm saying that if you have a random variable and if you do many and independent trials, then, and if you look at the whole independent trials and look at your distribution, then over a period of time, like this sum of many, like this independent random variable, like converges to its expectation. But what does this law of large number doesn't tell, right, is like, okay, how fast does this converge to expectation? This doesn't tell us, okay? And how likely the random variable is close to its expectation if we perform like our experiment exactly once, right? So from the law of large numbers, we can say, look, let X be blah, like, okay, if N is going to be infinity, then blah converges to this. But suppose I did only one random experiment. Can I still say that the value taken by my random experiment is close to expectation? And so to these kind of things, we need some sort of probabilistic inequalities, and this is what we'll try to say. So law of large number tells that, okay, it is possible to prove that for your random variable, most of the times you're close to your expectation, but what circumstances can we show this when we are doing only one experiment or two experiment, right? Because this is a situation we will encounter ourselves when we are doing randomized algorithms or algorithms in big data, okay? So we have to be careful. Okay, so this is something which I wanted to tell you last time. So randomized quicksort is something which I would like to do. The random variable Q is number of comparisons made by randomized quicksort on an array of n elements. What did we show? We showed that expected running time last time, or last to last time, expected running time is order n log n, right? So our expected number of comparisons is order n log n. Now you could ask, what is the probability that you will be close to your expectation, right? So this is what is called high probability analysis. So a possible analysis could be, if I could show that probability that Q greater than 10 n log n is C, and also we know that Q is less than or equal to n squared, then what can we say? So let's try to understand. So this is what I claim, that expectation of Q is this. Why? Let's try to understand this. So what is an expectation of Q? Look, it is possible number of possible comparison. So this I can write it t equal to 0 to n square, okay? Expect t times probability that Q equal to 2, t, right? What is the probability that Q takes t number of comparison into this? Now this we could write it summation t is less than or equal to say 10 n log n, right? T times probability Q equal to t plus summation t greater than 10 n log n probability t times probability Q equal to t. Now from here, what can I show? Look, t, I can write this 10 times n log n times summation t less than or equal to 10 n log n probability Q equal to t plus this. Okay, let's see at page. Okay. Okay. Now, what does this imply? So first term, what we get that list is less than or equal to, I can write 10 n log n summation t is less than or equal to 10 n log n probability Q equal to t. Plus, now what I'm doing for the next terms, look, if you look at correctly, then what is the worst term of t here? N square, right? Because we know that t is not more than n square. So now what I can do, I can take n square as a upper bound from here. So this is, I can write it down, n square times summation t greater than 10 n log n probability Q equal to t. Okay. Now let's ask ourselves, what is this probability? Right? Well, this is same as saying 10 n log n probability Q is less than or equal to 10 n log n, right? Plus n square times probability that Q is greater than 10 n log n. Okay. Now, can we come up with an upper bound on this probability? Anybody? Can we say this is upper bounded by this number? Anybody?
So 1 minus C.
Well, oh really? Okay, let's see why that may not work. Because what is this telling us? Probability that Q is at least 10 n log n is less than or equal to C, right? But we need an upper bound on this quantity. All this tells us that probability that this quantity Q is less than or equal to at most 10 n log n is at least 1 minus C. Do you get my point? From this, can we infer this? That it is upper bounded by 1 minus C? No. All we can infer this, it is at least 1 minus C. We cannot infer that it is at most 1 minus C. Okay? But this is definitely less than or equal to 1, right? Agreed? Because you have a random variable, right? So sum of the value of this random variable at each of this quantity is equal to 1, because a random variable gives a distribution, right? So do you understand this when I say this? Look, so think of what happens. Q is a random variable which gives you this running time, right? Now, basically, whatever this omega is, I don't know, I really do not know. But for each running time, it will give you a partition of omega. It will give you a partition of omega, right? And with respect to the probability defined, this will give you a probability distribution over omega. So if I sum this probability, this is equal to 1. So when I say probability Q is less than 10 n log n, then basically I'm saying that, well, it is sum of probabilities of this quantity plus this quantity plus this quantity plus this quantity. But we know the total sum is at most 1. So in particular, this is also less than or equal to 1. Like just simple probability. So we could use that as an upper bound. But we cannot use 1 minus c as an upper bound. Yes, we could also use that, but for that, that requires a very different kind of argument, not this one. Is that clear? Sayan?
Yeah.
Like, do you understand why I cannot use 1 minus c?
Yes.
Because all it says that with very good probability this happens. But look, what is that good probability? 1 minus c. But hey, this is also equal to 1. So for our purposes, that is good. Okay. So this implies that I can use this to say 10n log n plus n square. But what is the probability that Q is greater than 10n log n? Well, this is exactly what I said is at most c, right? So then I can use a c here. Okay. But you can say, hey, why are not using c equal to 1 here? Will that be useful for our purpose? I mean, I could also use the c is upper bounded by 1. But is that useful in showing whatever we want to show? Okay. So so that may not be useful, because if I put c equal to 1, all it says that, well, your running time is like n square. But if I can show that c is like, say, 1 over n cube, then this is like very minuscule quantity. Okay. But if you think about it, this is not what we started with. I wanted to show that. Okay. So this is what I wanted to show. But actually, you can show that expectation of Q is 10n log n. And how do you go about showing this? It's slightly to say, look, if this, like, so whatever this probability you write, x, you have to write 1 minus x. Okay. Whatever it is, right? So the total sum of this quantity and this quantity is x and 1 minus x. Okay. Sorry, if this is x, this quantity is x, then this is 1 minus x. Right? This quantity is 1. I don't have idea what this x and 1 minus x is, or maybe I should not use x. X is overloaded quantity. So let's use alpha. So suppose this quantity is alpha and this quantity is 1 minus alpha. Now, what can then can we say? Then this is less than or equal to 10n log n 1 minus alpha plus n square times alpha, right? And now this is what I can show. So if we have a good upper bound on alpha, okay, then this will imply that whatever maybe that quantity is, it is like 10n log n minus 10n log n alpha plus some n square times alpha. Now, why am I saying this? Because if this is more than this quantity, like if for some choices of alpha, this quantity will be much more than this positive quantity. Okay, so they can compensate on each other. But for most analysis, please don't worry about these little things. Okay, so you can choose how to optimize these kind of things, but that is not what I would like to focus on. So for us, for now, let's just focus. We use 1 for this, and we use the trivial c for this. Okay. Now the main question is, how do we go about proving that? So the main question is, how will someone go about showing this? Okay, if I may ask a question, how many of you have seen high probability analysis of quicksort? I'm sure you have seen quicksort, but how many have seen like that quicksort like is concentrated around its expectation with high probability. Have you seen this analysis before? Maybe I can do some poll. Okay. No, I don't know how to do this. Okay. Okay. Has anybody seen this before? You can use chat. Okay. So, okay. So because if everybody would have seen, then probably I would have avoided, but let's do it because this is very insightful. But this is not going to come so quickly. Okay. Okay. But we'll see. Okay. So now I will change track and I will get to okay. So let me, just to motivate something, let me start with let's keep one simple example in our head, okay, which could be useful for us or for you to keep in head. Okay. 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 So here's an example. Okay. So you have an A, which is an array of size M. So if possible, please write in your notebook because, and keep this example in front so that we'll try all inequalities on this. Okay. Half the element of A are green and half the element of A are red. Okay. Now we perform the following experiment. Okay. We perform the following experiment. Independently pick a random element of A, okay, and check its color. Okay. And now X is a random variable that counts the number of times we picked green, okay, green element. Okay. Now let's set up some random variable. What is it? Xi. Okay. Xi is a random variable that is 1 if we get green in ith pick. Okay. So what is an expectation of Xi? What is an expectation of Xi? It's 0. I don't care. So expectation of Xi, it is 1. So probability Xi equal to 1, which is when you pick green, guys. So you have M elements and M by 2, and let's assume that M is even. Otherwise, it might, M is even, doesn't matter for us. So we have M by 2 by M, which is half, which implies expectation of X, which is summation of expectation of Xi by linearity of expectation, is N over 2. So let's just keep this in our head. Okay. Okay, so let's keep this an example in our, like, please write it down because we'll try to compute more and more things of this and show how powerful object implies. So something which is the first inequality which we learn is the following. What is called Markov's inequality. So if I ask you a following question, is that, say, how many students in a class, uh, how many students in a class consisting of n students, okay, consisting of n students get twice the average mark. So what happened is that we conducted some test, okay, and test average came out, test average, say Z. And now I ask you a following question. How many students, okay, how many students got score greater than equal to 2Z? Can you say something? Hello, anybody? Look, this is not something probability, but like, okay.
Not more than n by 2.
Huh?
Not more than n by 2.
Why?
Or else the average would be more than
Exactly.
Z.
So we don't need anything, right? Look, so what I'm trying to, okay, so, so suppose more than n by 2 plus person would have got 2Z. Then my average, the total score is 2Z plus something times n, right? This cannot be less than equal to Z. This is more than Z, right? So this is an averaging argument. My claim is that Markov inequality is nothing but an averaging argument. Okay. Okay. So this is something which I would like to convey to you, that do not think of Markov inequality anything but the following situation. Okay. If I ask you, how many students would have got this? Now, what is this is nothing but some sort of weighted average, nothing more than that. How many of this or what of this? Okay. So at least this is the one good way of keeping Markov inequality. This is nothing but an averaging argument. Okay. So let's see the proof. Why do I say this is an averaging argument? Okay. So what I'm saying, for any a greater than equal to 0, probability that x is greater than equal to a is this. Okay. So I just apply definition of expectation of x, omega in omega, xw probability w, and then I write, okay, fine. I all xw between 0 and a, and all xw greater than equal to a, right? And we are interested in what? Probability x greater than equal to a. This is what we are interested in. So now when I look at here, what I know, for all this summation, xw is greater than equal to a. And this is where we use the fact that x is a non-negative random variable. Okay, it doesn't take negative values. Okay, now why? Because then I can say, look, this quantity is greater than equal to the last quantity, right? Because this quantity is not negative, right? This quantity also something non-negative, something positive, because look, probability of w is anywhere between 0 and 1. So that's a non-negative object. But xw being a non-negative random variable also implies that this multiplication for each sum is non-negative. Otherwise, I cannot say this, right? Because it's possible that this is negative quantity and this is very, very huge quantity. Like, yeah, this is very, very, yeah. So what could happen is that this guy is, how to say this? If this could have been negative, then what? So if this would have been negative, can I say that this step implies this step? Let's see. Well, no, because it's possible that this is like some negative quantity and this is some positive quantity, right? So this and this is much small. This and this is smaller than this quantity, right? Right. So I cannot say this quantity is larger than this quantity if we had like if we allow x to take negative quantities. But since x is positive or non-negative random variables, I know that this summation or this terminology is greater than or equal to 0. So this plus this, and now we know that every xw is at least a. So I can write a times this and 8. And this is exactly the kind of analysis which you did. Look, each of this guy takes z quantity. If more than this will take, then blah will happen. So this is exactly why I say this is an averaging principle. Okay. And now from here, you can get this. Another way to look at, and this is the only inequality which you need to know in life. Okay. Rest is just a overstatement of this. And you can equivalently write this. But there is also, you can think of this, there's also continuous form of this. Or because if you take discrete, then it's like a step function. But if you talk about slightly negative, slightly continuous quantity, then this basically tells you this is basically the function, right? Remember, x is a random variable, right? So x is a function from omega to real number, right? So that function is given by this quantity, okay? And this is an integration over 0 to infinity and blah and blah. But what I would like to show to you is basically, if you draw, I mean, maybe I should draw slightly differently for you because all I've been doing is discrete. So let's not confuse you with non-discrete quantity. Okay. 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 So let's draw this curve. Here the value of x and here probability x equal to x. Now, based on what x takes, what will you get? What will you get if you x takes? Okay, so x could take some value here, possible values, right? If it takes some value, it could take this, it could take this. I mean, in fact, like, so some sort of, how to do this? Some sort of step function. So what is the probability that right? So for example, what is the probability that x is greater than or equal to 0, right? It is 1, right? So it will take some value here, which is 1. But as you vary, so and this is, I'm not, look, I'm going to do this x greater than or equal to 3. So if I say, what is the probability that someone takes greater than or equal to 1? What is the probability that someone takes greater than or equal to 2? So on and so forth. So you will get, how to draw this, okay? Okay. So I get this quantity. Okay, wait, let me see what I have drawn. So something like this, something like this, something like this, something like this. Okay, this is what you will get. Okay, what is the meaning of this? Larger you get, right? Smaller probability, it will be close to 1. So if I say, what is a probability which is greater than or equal to some quantity, right? Right? So if I say probability that x is greater than or equal to 0, because it's a non-negative random variable, is closer to 1, right? If I say, what is this? It is closer to 1. But if I go further and further away, the probability of getting some number is lesser and lesser. So for example, if I say, suppose this quantity is z, and say, what is the probability that x takes z? Well, you draw here. Right? This is what it is. Now, what is this area? The total area is basically expectation of X, whole thing. So do you recall how we compute? So this is like, what are the possible values random variable takes? And given this, what is the probability? So if I ask you, what is the probability that X is greater than or equal to Z? It will like some probability here. Okay, so you go and mark that point, right? So if you notice, as we go away from this, the probability will only tend to decrease, right? So you get these kind of state-like structure, right? And this is what area of this is your expectation of Z. When you say, what is the probability that Z is greater than or equal to Z? Well, what and Z, so what is this area? Let's try to understand what is this area. This area is nothing but Z into probability of Z greater than or equal to Z, right? Now, can I say this is, but what I know, this is less than total number of, total area, which is expectation of it. So probability X is greater than or equal to Z is less than or equal to expectation of X divided by Z. Get my point? Any question? So I can also think of this expectation of X in this circumstances is like total area, because if you sum this up for each quantity, this is what you exactly get expectation of X. What will be expectation of X? So like probability that X equal to X, some quantity. Probability X something greater than or equal to some quantity. So you just sum this total area. And when you fix some quantity, then you're just taking the small sub area inside this curve. And that sub area you would write down, which is your this quantity that is less than or equal to total area, which is expectation of X, and then you get this inequality. So there's also a picture way of keeping Markov's inequality in our head. Okay, question? Okay. Okay, so now let's see why this is useful for our purposes. Okay. So if I ask myself a question, okay, so let's try to understand our running example on this structure. So remember our running example? What was our running example? We had an array of size M with half green ball, half green element and half red element. And we were doing a random experiment where we did n random experiment, and each time we computed, we took it out in element, informed it random and checked its color. Okay, and we proved that expectation of that X was equal to n by 2. Let's ask ourselves question, what is the probability that X is greater than 3n by 4? Can we apply Markov's inequality now and say something? Anybody?
Yes, we can, but what's the point? That's,
Meaning?
So what you get at the end?
How what will we get?
N over 2 times 4 over 3, right?
Yes. So we'll get, I think you should get 2/3, right? Because what is this says? Probability that X is greater than A is less than or equal to expectation of X divided by A. So, so this is like n over 2, and a is our 3n over 4, right? So this is equal to n over 2 times 4 over 3n. So nn will get cancelled, so it is 2 over 3. Okay, great. But if I ask you, what is the probability x is less than n over 4? Can we say something? Using Markov?
But you want upper bound or a lower bound?
So we just now said that probability that x is at least 3n by 4 is 2/3. We've said this using Markov. This is exactly what we applied Markov here. Right? Now I'm interested in what is the probability that x is less than n by 4?
1 minus probability of x greater than equal to n by 4.
Okay, so what I was saying, this is equal to probability 1 minus probability x is greater than equal to 3n by 4. Is that what you said?
Is n by 4, I think.
Oh, yeah, right, n by 4. Okay. But what is probability x is greater than equal to n by 4? Will we get something useful? Probability x is greater than equal to a, or maybe say I say less than equal to a, so then it is strictly greater than n by 4, right? If I apply the same Markov inequality, what I'm going to get? I'm going to get, let's see, am I going to get anything useful at all? N by 2 divided by?
N by 4, that is 2.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's completely useless information. Do you agree to that?
Yes.
Okay. So now let's ask ourselves, is Markov inequality tight? Like, or what I mean to say is, does there exist a set of distribution where Markov, I mean, you cannot beat Markov. I mean, you cannot, like, this is the truth. So Markov, it's not that you can improve Markov given the circumstances. Like given, what does Markov say? If you notice, Markov says, let x be a non-negative random variable over a probability space this, then for any a greater than 0, this happens, right? Now I want to say, can we construct a random variable over a probability space? And we say, look, on this is the best you can hope for. Do you get my question? Okay, so here's my simple example. So x is a random variable. It takes two values, only two values, 0 and n square. It takes 0 with probability 1 minus 1 over n. Okay, and it takes n square with probability 1 over n. What is an expectation of x? Is like 0 doesn't count, so it's like 1 by n into n square, so it is n. So if I ask, what is the probability that x is less than n by 2? Here, this is exact computation. If you notice, probability that x is less than n by 2 is 1 minus 1 over n. Right? If someone asks you, what is the probability that x is less than n by 2? Well, it is 1 minus 1 by n because it only takes 0 or 1. So probability x is less than n by 2 is same as probability x equal to 0. Agreed? Which is 1 minus 1 by n. Now, as n tends to infinity, probability that x is strictly less than n by 2 is 1 minus 1 by n. Okay? Now, as n tends to infinity, right? This guy will tends to 1. Right? Now, what does this tells us? This tells us that, well, for such kind of random variable, whatever we get from Markov is tight, right? So if I would have asked, what is the probability that, what is the probability that x is strictly less than n by 2 is like 1 minus 1 by n, right? So hoping for some things like that Markov will give you a two-sided inequality is almost impossible, right? And what I mean by two-sided inequality, so Markov, what does Markov does is basically it says, well, I bound this, right? But the kind of example which I asked you here, well, what happens that I would have basically liked to say that, look, if it is not far from expectation, then I should be able to bound this bad probability here and this bad probability here. But Markov does not allow us to do this. And why it cannot allow us to do this? Because there are examples where it is almost impossible, because here is an inequality, here is an example where if I would have said that, okay, what is your expectation is n, what is that you are say half of like you are just n by 2 and 3n by 2, what is the probability that you are between n by 2 and 3n by 2, right? Well, it's going to be, can I say this probability that you are going away from n by 2. So for example, in this case, if I said, okay, fine, here is my mean, here is my n by 2, here is my 3n by 2, right? And I say, can I bound this and this with some minuscule quantity of probability? Answer is no, right? Because for this example, 1 minus 1 by n is here. So it's like close to 1, right? So there are random variables. If only thing which we are going to use that for our random variable, that is a non-negative random variable, okay? Then hoping that I can get a tail inequality which is able to give me bounds on like both sides of our mean, then that is not possible. There are concrete examples, as I showed just now to you, for which we cannot achieve this. This also shows that the Markov inequality is in some sense tight. Like this is the only thing which you can prove from here. Okay, any question? Okay, okay. So now from Markov, let's go to another kind of okay. And this is an object which is used every time we try to let x be a discrete random variable and h from R to R be a non-negative function. Then probability that h of x is greater than or equal to t is less than or equal to expectation of h of x equal to t. Do you see a proof for this? Look, I'm saying that h R to R a non-negative function. Okay, then what is an x? X is a function from omega to real number. Now, what is the property of h of x? I can define a new function h of x from omega to R as follows, which is nothing but for all w in omega, right? What is this? It is nothing but h of x of w. And what is the property of h? It's a non-negative function. It implies that h of x is a non-negative random variable. Now we can apply Markov's inequality. What does Markov says to us? Markov's, so if you apply Markov here directly by Markov, right, then we get probability that h of x is greater than equal to t is less than equal to expectation of h of x greater than equal to t. Okay, so this is about, but let's add another page here. Suppose I have a x from omega to r, and I have an h. And suppose even x is a non-negative random variable. So what can I say? I can say, look, x is a non-negative random variable. Can I say x is greater than a if and only if x square is greater than or equal to a square? Is that fine? Hello? So what is x greater than or equal to a? X greater than or equal to a is a set of w, right? Set of w in omega, right? What do you call x of w is greater than or equal to a. So this is a set in omega. Okay, so now I'm claiming to you that x is greater than a if and only if x square is greater than or equal to a square, right? So I'm trying to understand. Hello?
Oh, so you try to confuse us, or
No,
yeah.
no, Federer. I'm trying to say to you is that I have one random variable, okay, and I want to understand this random variable. But what are we generally interested in? Probability that x is greater than or equal to a. Suppose for now, this is the object we are interested in. Okay. Now I want to say that suppose I also knew how x square behaves. Like I have x, I also have x square knowledge. I also have knowledge about x cube. Okay. Can we say something more then?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I mean to say is that, can I say probability that x is greater than or equal to a is same as probability x square is greater than or equal to a square? Can I say this? Because if I can say this, then if I have a better bound on this, then I will get a better bound on the left-hand side. Now, how do I understand that? So I said, look, these new function x square, e power x, these are new set of random variables defined over the same sample space omega, right? So look, every random variable x is defined over omega and PR, right? So when I say x is greater than or equal to a, as I wrote down above, it is some set of, and we are in the world of discrete. So basically, what is this? Now, these are the points in omega, right? So what you do, basically you sum these guys' probability. You sum these guys' probability to get a probability x greater than or equal to a. Now I want to say, well, as an object, if I can show to you that, look, I am asking myself, what is x square greater than or equal to a square? Like, what will this correspond to in my omega world? So, well, I'm saying that, look, so I'm not trying to confuse, but I'm rather trying to show this great thing which happens in all these inequalities. Okay. Okay. So now let's try to understand. X square is another random variable, right? This is also going from omega to r. What is this? It is like x square of a is a function, right? So x square of w is nothing but xa whole square. right? Right? Now, I ask myself, great. So when is x square greater than equal to some quantity, say a square, I ask myself. Then I say, look, if and only if x is greater than equal to a. Now, this is where I'm going to use the fact that x is a non-negative random variable, because it could, otherwise it could have been that if x should have been negative quantity also, then for example, if x should have been, say, taking -1 and 1, or say x should have been taking -2 and 2 also. But then x square is going to take 4 when x square is going to take 4 when x is going to take -2 and x is going to equal to take 2. But since I have removed this negative quantity from my world, so x is going to take 4 if and only if x is going to take 2, right? X square is 4 if and only if x is equal to 2. So what happens is, because of this, now we have a clear-cut mapping between space of one random variable versus space, like, or the event of one random variable versus event of other random variable. Okay, so this is why we are going to use non-negative random variable. So for example, this is one example. So for example, if I would have taken a random variable ex omega to r, what can I say? Well, ex of w is nothing but e of xw, right? This is also another random variable. Now I can ask, oh ho, so what is the set ex of a, right? Or rather, say, if I want to say, when is ex greater than equal to ea? I want to say this is if and only if x is greater than equal to a. So what does it mean? Look, what is ex greater than equal to a? This is going to be some element w in omega, same omega, and e of xw is greater than equal to e of a. This is exactly what it is, right? Now, if I write x greater than equal to w, say, let's say w prime in omega, x of w prime is greater than equal to a. Now, if I just set this set is equal to this set, then both of them has probability PR. This is the probability function which is going to apply to this omega. Now, because as a set they are same, PR will apply to this, give me the same quantity. PR will apply to this and give me the same quantity, right? So is the idea clear what is happening with different sets of functions? Shredder, is it clear?
Yes, I think
Yeah,
so.
yeah, it's clear.
Okay, so now why are we trying to do these things? Okay, the reason why we are trying to do this is very simple. So you have x omega to r. What am I interested in? Ultimately, I'm interested in basically what is the probability that x is greater than some quantity a. Okay, but to do this, I will not compute this. I will either compute, okay, well, what about this is equal to, like, we are only working the condition. Oh, well, this is same as saying that x square is greater than equal to a square. This is same as saying probability ex is greater than equal to ea. Now, if I can say this, then in this situation, the bounds which you get from here, like evaluating, applying Markov on this function, leads to what is called Chernoff bounds. And if you apply to this function your Markov, then you get Chebyshev. Okay, so this is all that. So every instantiation, every kind of most tail inequality which you see is basically Markov applied to an appropriately chosen function. Okay, and this is where when I said, right, this is where you apply this. So you start with a discrete random variable, you pick a function which is a non-negative function and then say, hey, this, if and only if this, so you directly apply this, okay? And you may ask that, Saket, you just now showed to us that there is an example where there are families of examples where when X is my random variable, then Markov is the best we can hope for. Yes, but all we assumed about Markov is this: X is a non-negative discrete random variable, nothing more. Maybe at times X consists of simple random functions. Like if you look at our running example, what is X? X is summation of xi's. We're going I going from 1 to n, right? So X is constituent of n independent random variables, right? Now, those are different than just taking some X. If we know more information about X, maybe we can exploit this constituent of X, or right, or say this way. Markov is nothing but an averaging principle, hence it applies to all non-negative discrete random variable. When I come to Chebyshev, it will only give you something useful if you know more about your random variable, okay? And if you want to apply Chernoff or even higher moment or other kind of functions, which I just now wrote, you need to know more about those functions to make full use of the power of these random variables, okay? So this is what you will see in a minute. So for example, look at our running example. X was n independent random variable where each independent random variable is like coin toss, or we are choosing one of the array array index uniform at random and looking at like whether it is green or red, right? But X was summation of x1 to xn. Where did my Markov inequality try to use it? Well, all is said, your X, which is like this, I don't care. All I care, X is a non-negative random variable, and that's all that it cared. But if we start to exploit other properties of our random variables, we start to get more and more interesting upper bounds on the tail inequalities, okay? So one such tail inequalities is your Chebyshev, okay? So now what I would like to tell is a little bit about variance, and let's get into Chebyshev inequality, okay? So what is the variance of X is measure of how does it deviate from its mean. So what it formally means, like, so you take a random variable X minus E of X and of whole square, and you take expectation of it. This is what is called variance. So basically, and there's also a notion of something called standard deviation, which is square root of variance of X. Now, what we'll try to do is like, so you basically think of this as like, what is variance is like, okay, fine. I have a random variable. I create another random variable, which is basically for each value of X, I just see how close or far from the mean each of these values are. And then I take expectation of that. What is the probability that those values will be taken? Okay. So this is what variance means. Okay. Now, why do we write variance of X is this? Well, this is just a simple derivation. You define y equal to x minus e of x whole square, and then you just, as this is a new random variable, and then you just a minus b the whole square formula you apply, and then you get this. Okay, and now, so now I apply variance on this. So variance of X is nothing but expectation of Y, right? Expectation of Y, right? So and then see, and this just follows from linearity of expectation, right? Because if you apply expectation on Y, then expectation of X squared minus 2 times expectation of X, and what is expectation of X? Is expectation of X, because expectation of any constant quantity is same as expectation. So you get this. So this is what we should remember. The variance of x is expectation of x square minus expectation of x whole square. There are some other things about variance that is quite useful. So you can also define, we already defined when two random variables x, y are called mutually independent. If for every x, y in R, probability that x takes x and y takes y is probability x takes x and y takes y. And we had spent time. So you can prove that if x and y are independent random variables, then their variance is like linearity of sum. It just sums up. Okay, I'm not going to prove this, but this is something to remember. And if x and y are mutually independent, then expectation of xy is expectation of x into expectation of y. You can also prove this by just using the independence and previous formula. Now, what did Chebyshev inequality says? Let if variance of x is less than infinity, then for any a, probability that x minus ex is greater than or equal to a is some quantity. Now let's try to parse this. This talks about x minus e of x is greater than or equal to a. So here is my e of x. What is x minus e of x? What is the modulus of x minus e of x? So it means this place. What is this quantity? E of x minus x if yeah, so if I subtract ex minus x is greater than or equal to what? A. And here, so basically x minus e of x is good. So basically what we are interested in this is this place and this place. So if you look at Markov, what did Markov said? Markov basically said that what is the probability that you are here? But Chebyshev tells us what is the probability that x takes values here and x takes value here, like not centered around its mean. It is less than or equal to variance of x over a square. And now, as I told you before, like we are going to get this inequality by just applying Markov inequality to a certain random function, right? So what is the random function we apply? Random variable, you basically apply to y. Y x minus e of x whole square is a non-negative random variable. Why it is a non-negative random variable? Because it's a square. So square of any function is a non-negative random variable. And once it is a non-negative random variable, we can just directly apply Markov to y for a square. Why? Because look, probability that y is greater than or equal to a square is expectation of y greater than or equal to a square, which is same as probability x minus ex is greater than or equal to a square, this. And this is where we are going to use that, look, because of non-negative random variable, right? This set x minus e of x is greater than or equal to a, like the points where this happens and the point where this happens, it's same. And this is why we can apply, see, we got from here to here as this. Any question? This I already explained to you previously. Why, right? Like, so what does this say? That look, x minus ex is greater than or equal to a square. If you look at your random variable x, like, when will this happen? Well, if x minus ex is x minus ex is minus a, or x minus ex is greater than or equal to a, right? Then definitely x minus ex the whole square is greater than or equal to a square, or this is which is same as mod x minus ex is greater than or equal to a, right? So in other words, let's see. When can we say that x minus e of x whole square is greater than or equal to a square? If and only if x minus e of x to minus a, or x minus e of x is greater than or equal to a, right? So this is crisp into this mod value. Okay. Okay. Now notice here, to apply Markov, we are not assuming anything about x, but we are assuming about to the function which we are going to apply. So given x, we are going to apply Markov on y, which is a non-negative random variable, right? So I wanted to compute something about x, but this is not something. So something about x. So how do we go about it? So given this x, I computed, I transform some if and only if conditions to some other random variable, which is a non-negative random variable, and I applied applied Markov there. Okay. So what does this imply? So if I declutter this, right, declutter this quantity, what this means? Probability that x is less than expectation of x minus a is variance of x a square. Probability that x is greater than expectation of x plus a is this. This is exactly, if you declutter this, this is what this quantity means. Okay. Okay. Now ask ourselves, okay, to our running example, that what was our running example? This, let's ask ourselves, what is right? So we had x greater than equal to expectation of x was equal to n by 2. And now suppose we showed that probability that x is greater than equal to 3n by 4. And last time we showed using Markov, this is less than equal to 2/3, right? Ideally, you'd like to have an upper bound on this probability that so that as n tends to infinity, like this tends to 0. But from this we couldn't. But now I can say that, look, probability x is greater than equal to 3n by 4 is less than equal to probability mod x minus e of x is greater than equal to n over 4, right? And now if I apply Chebyshev to this, this is variance of x, which we'll compute in a minute, divided by a square, which is equal to n square by 4. Okay, and let's see what is this. Now recall, what was x? X was like summation of xi, where xi was taking 0 or 1. It took 1 with probability half and 0 with other. Because we had this array of size m, we randomly picked an element, element from there, and if it was green, that is what xi is 1 at, and half the elements were green. Now these xi's are independent random variable. Okay. Now let's ask ourselves, so what is the meaning of this? So variance of x is summation variance of xi. Okay. This we have used the fact that our random variables are independent. But now let's try to compute variance of each xi. Okay. So what is this? Expectation of xi squared minus expectation of xi. Okay. Now what is my xi square? It takes 1 or 0, right? And it takes 1 when xi takes 1. So expectation of xi square is equal to how much? What is expectation of xi square? Is half.
Expectation
Look.
Yeah, same.
Right? Because look, xi square takes also 1 and 0, and it takes 1 when xi is 1. This is 0 when xi equal to 0. So expectation of xi square is same as probability xi square equal to 1, which is same as probability xi equal to 1, which is equal to half. Okay. So it implies that, okay, now what is an expectation xi whole square? Well, this is 1/4. So variance of xi is going to be half minus 1/4, which is 1/4. Okay. So that implies variance of x, which is summation variance of xi, is equal to n over 4. Now if I substitute here n over 4, what are we going to get? N over 4, right? And this was it was x, what was a was like n by 4 whole square. So this was n square by 16. So what are you going to get now? You're going to get 4 over n, if I understand correctly. Is it correct?
Yes.
4 over n. And you notice as n tends to 0. But notice what we proved now. So what we managed to prove now, if you notice here, is that, well, in our experiment, our running example, right? Our running example, we know the number of green ball is n by 2. And we asked, well, what is the probability that the number of ball is greater than or equal to 3n by 4? We got actually 4 over n. In fact, what we proved that not only this probability that your balls is actually more than n over more than 3n over 4 or less than n over 4 is actually 4 over n, because it was mod, right? So this is what we managed to show. So what does this tells us? That as n tends to infinity, this probability is going to be 0, and my number of green balls is going to be concentrated near my mean. Okay? Okay. But you may ask, but what happens to our example? You said that Markov inequality was tight, and you gave us an example. What would happen if we compute its variance and try to apply Chebyshev? I would say just try. Let's see what happens. Okay? It's a good exercise for you. And you will see that for that example, you will get completely meaningless information. Because you know you cannot get low probability event, because you know that there is a possibility of going away from the mean with very good probability. Okay. Okay. Now, like we won when we applied Chebyshev, because our x, our example of x was much nicer. It consisted of not one random variable, several random variables which are independent, which was acting independent with each other. And so this is one example of Chernoff giving you more power. But we'll see one more example. Let's see if I have. Okay. Okay. So you can also say, like, you can substitute a is like t times variance of x 1 over t square, because if you substitute a t rho, it becomes t into rho x, and rho x is top is variance of x, which will get cancelled. So this is also one thing which people use. Okay. So now let me give you another example for this inequality. So suppose we start at origin 0, and at each step we move left 1 unit with probability half and move right with probability half. Okay. This is a random walk on the line. Okay. After n steps, how far from the origin? What do you think?
What do you mean by how far, Saket?
So I have origin, right?
Yeah. No, but like on average, it's probably in the middle, I would say.
So after
The expectancy is the middle.
Yeah. So what I mean by how far from, like, what will the expected steps you would have taken from the origin?
Oh, the farther way.
Expected number of steps.
0.
n by 2. N
Yeah.
by 2.
Is the question clear? So I start with 0. I toss a coin. If I get head, I move right. Okay, like one step. Again, I toss a coin. If I get head, I go this. If I and again, if I get a tail, I come back. Right. So it's like maybe like this, like this, like this. And I'm asking after n by 2. This is the fun for working from home. Okay. Noises from children. Okay. So any idea?
N by 2, let's say.
I'm not able to hear you. Okay. So
Okay, I'm not saying.
okay. So this is how we can set up things, right? So at time I, let xi be -1 if we move to the left, right? Left. And +1 if move to the right. And yn is a position at time n. Okay? So yn is summation I equal to n xi, right? Is it correct, right? Is yn gives you where you will be? Look at this, right? If you would have taken all right step, then yn can take n. If you're taking all left step, you can get -n, right? So it will tell you what is your displacement from 0 is. This is exactly where it will be. Okay. And now, what is your expectation of yn? Let's see. Look at xi. Expectation of xi is 1 with probability half, -1 with probability half, so it is 0. So definitely expectation of yn is 0. Right? So, well, if you have this coin tosses and you do this, expected number of steps you will take is 0. Like when I say not steps, like your expected displacement from the origin is 0. Like you will be back at your own place. Okay. Now, what is the variance of yn? Well, these xi's are independent random variable. So variance of xi is what? So let's compute the variance of xi. So variance of xi is nothing but expectation of xi whole square minus expectation of xi square. So this is 0, 0. So let's not worry about this. This is 0. So not good. But what is the expectation of xi square? Now notice here that xi square takes only one value, 1. Right? -1 whole square is 1, +1 whole square is 1. And what is the probability that xi square is equal to 1? Is that probability xi equal to -1 plus probability that xi equal to +1, which is equal to 1. Right? So what is variance of xi? Well, this is why we get variance of xi equal to n. Now, if I ask you, okay, how far from the origin will, what is the probability that expectation is too far away from its origin? Then now I can apply Chebyshov, right? What is this inequality means? Well, here, this is 0. What is the probability that you are like more than -2 root n away, or you're greater than or equal to some t root n steps, like here. So now I can apply Chebyshov, and who will say that it is like, what is my t times, this is my standard deviation, which is less than or equal to 1 by t square, right? So if I put 10, let's see, yeah, if I put 10, then it will like 1 by 100 or something, which is still, if you notice for this case, we are not able to say that as n tends to infinity, this is like something which is like will go to 0, because all I'm able to say that you are far, well, yeah, so you're far away from your mean 0 in terms of t root n is like some constant probability only, Right? Of course, if I can put t equal to n1/3, then I can boost this probability. But then, okay, but we can prove much stronger things in the kind of setting we are in, and that is what we are moving towards. Okay, so this is what the motivation of Chernow was. In many applications, what we are interested in X, which is sum of independently bounded random variables. Okay, so now you can ask yourself that kind of applications where we have been using, what are we trying to compute? Some expectation of xi square, expectation of something here. But to say all these things, okay, let's say, okay, so if x and y are independent random variables, then this happens. Okay, and then if you notice, I have been using the fact that variance of summation xi is summation variant of xi. You can ask, look, for 2 it is fine, it is like 2 independent, but if xi were like x1, x2, ... xn, what should be the condition that it will imply that I can write this? Does it require that all x1 to xn are pairwise independent random variable, or it is enough that for any 2 of them are independent random variables? So this is something which we need to understand, and this will come into play as I explain to you later. So Chebyshев also works when all you know about your random variable is that, well, I know that I have say x consists of x1 to xn, and they are not fully independent, but I know something more about their independence. Okay, so then, or maybe I know that they are x1, any 3 independent random variables, if I take from this n independent random variable, they are independent. This is what is the notion of 3-wise independent random variable. Maybe not, if I take any 5 random variable, then they are independent among us. So this provides a limited independence. And then if it is limited independence like 2, then Chebyshev is very useful, and you cannot get anything more than that. If this is 3, you can come up with some x minus, or say 4, then you can come up with x minus ex to the power whole 4, and you can come up with something equivalent notion of whatever 4th variant and a power 4 or something of this nature. But at times we know more about our random variables, that actually not only this, all these independent, I pick any subset and they are independent, right? This is what is captured nicely by our next set of bounds, which is Chernow bound. So, which is sum of independent bounded random variables. What is the meaning of independent and bounded? Well, bounded means xi takes value within a range. Okay, it's not unbounded. So, for example, xi is between 0 and 1, or xi is between -1 and 1, normalizing. Okay, and x is nothing but summation of these xi. So they're assuming many more things about these things. For example, what are we assuming? That xi's are independent, bounded random variable. So in particular, if we had indicator random variable, then it only takes value 0 and 1. So definitely it is bounded. And if x1, x2, they're all independent and indicator random variable, then this definitely comes into the regime of Chernow bounds. Okay, and for these cases we can apply much more stronger bounds. Okay, I'm not going to give you a proof for this, but this is basically basically I will tell you by applying what kind of inequality will we get it. But if I just directly apply for random walk, our kind of bound, we can prove actually these kind of bounds, right? So t root n is like less than equal to 2 times e minus t square by 2, right? So even if I substitute t equal to like any function of n, right, what are you going to get? like any small function of n, like say log star n, even then this is a function of n, and as n tends to infinity, this will become 0. Okay, so we can prove much stronger tail bounds in the kind of situation where we are in. Why? Because look, even us in our setting, these xi's are independent random variable, all of them, and they take what value? They take either -1 or 1. So this is a bounded interval. Okay. So this is the kind of things you can prove. Let x1 to xk be k independent binary random variables, such that for each I, expectation of xi, which is probability, is pi, and this pi could vary, and x is summation of the xi, and then what is expectation of x is like summation of pi. Then you can get an upper tail bound, like x is greater than or equal to 1 plus delta mu with some probability, and if mu is between some range, you can get some other lower tail bound. I'm not going to prove this, but how do you get this? Is basically you apply Markov inequality with given an x, you apply to your random variable EFX, or basically you apply to some random variable EX. That's it. You apply Markov with this new random variable and you're done. Right? Because whatever may be, look, what is the function E of A of x? Any exponential function is positive. It's a non-negative. Right? So once the function becomes non-negative, you can apply Markov inequality. All it Markov says, look, if x is a non-negative random variable, you can apply me. So given your x, you apply non-negative random variable, and this is why you're getting this e power this and e power that, is because you're applying to these kind of random variable. So given x, what will you say? Well, I am interested in probability x greater than a, which is same as probability ex is greater than or equal to e power a, and for this you will apply, for this you have computed your Markov inequality, which will give you these kind of upper bounds. So this is a good exercise to try, or look into the book of the book which we are going to refer. And there are several special cases of Chernoff bounds. So for example, one important regime of interest is like, well, what is the probability that when delta is between 0 and 1, so you can get something which will tell you that x is greater than something with this. So just remember that it is something like expectation minus how far away from your expectation is, so minus delta square mu by some constant. This is what generally the forms are. Okay, and this is a general form of Chernoff bound. Okay, notice here I am not assuming that x is a non-negative integer random variable. So when variables are not positive, then bounds depend on n, while in the non-negative case there is no dependence on n. This is dimension free. So if your random variable can take negative values, then the kind of upper bounds you are able to prove on the probability on the tail inequalities is slightly weaker when you have a positive random variable. Okay, and it's of this nature. Okay, any question?
Where does the n come from? It should be a k, no?
From where does this n comes?
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's part of your proof. You will see that
Okay.
yeah, things start to mess around a bit. Okay. Okay. But if people would be interested at some point of time, I can give a proof, but proof is not very illustrative. Okay. Like you have to understand your situation and try to use one of these bounds. And if not, you will be able to tweak these bounds to do your own. Okay. So
Okay,
let
but
me.
what does it end here?
What is n here?
Yes.
I mean, it should be k, no?
Oh,
This is what I mean.
right. Oh, sorry. You're right. This is k.
Yeah, it's okay.
This is k. Sorry, this is my fault. Yeah, it should be k. Like it just depends on the number of random
No
variables.
problem.
Yes. Okay. Okay. So let's see some nice application, right? Look, our random variable were not taking, what is that called? Our random variable were not taking negative quantity. So you can forget this n. So you can show it is 2 times expectation minus t square by 2, which is great. Okay. Now, what do you think of our running example, which we were trying to do? Do you think that also becomes very good? Right? So that's something which you can try. Like, this is not like if you apply directly itself, that how far away from your mean will be, right? You will get amazingly now much and much better bound if you apply one of these tail inequalities. Okay. I want to give a slightly, okay. I want to give an example from a slightly different random experiment, which we will be doing, which will be basis of several of our what you call algorithms in big data, right? So we saw one example which was reservoir sampling, and this is another example which will be very useful for our purpose. Okay, and this is called balls and beans. Okay, so what is this balls and bean? So we have m balls and n beans. Okay, so we have this n beans, bean 1, bean 2, dot dot dot, bean n. And now we have m balls in our hand. Okay, and each ball is thrown uniformly at random. So basically, you choose one bin uniformly at random, and you put that ball in that bin. Okay, you put that ball in the bin, and the kind of questions you are interested in is like load of the bin. Like, what can be the load of a bin? Means load of the bin means number of balls in the bins. Okay, so this is our random experiment. Now let's try to prove some small things about this. Okay, and this is a very fundamental problem with many applications. So this is why we have chosen here to explain to you the load and this and that. So let Zij be indicator for ball I falling into bin J. Okay. So, and what is Xj? Is basically if I sum the random variable Zij, then it is number of balls in bin J. Now let's ask ourselves, do you buy this? Summation j equal to n Zij equal to 1. What is Zij when I range from j equal to 1 onto? So like if I have a 1 ball, it can only go to one of the bins, right? Right? So summation Zij is equal to 1 deterministically. There's nothing more happening there. Okay? Because this is basically summation of which one of the indicator random variable will be 1. So since a ball can go to only one bin in my experiment, only Zij will be 1 for exactly 1 j and 0 for all other guys. And what is the expectation of Zij? Is equal to 1 by n, right? Because whatever we're doing, we were uniformly at random guessing the bin and putting that ball. So Zij is like 0 or 1, but Zij is 1 with probability 1 over n, right? So Zij is an indicator random variable which takes 1 and 0. It takes 1 with probability 1 over n. So expectation of Z is 1 by n for all ij. And what is an expectation of Xj? Well, expectation of Xj is this number of bins in this. So which is like roughly m over n. Because you sum over m objects, each of them is 1 by n. So this is this. So we are interested in maximum load. So now let's think that we have n balls and n bins. So what is the expectation of the maximum load? Well, expectation of Xz is m by n. So n by n, so 1. Okay. But what are we really interested to or prove that let y be the max over each xi, the maximum load, then probability that y is more than this. Remember, our expectation of any bin is 1, right? Is less than 1 by n squared with high probability, and hence expectation of y is this. Do you know what? Do you see why this will be true? If I show this, then high probability, and hence expectation of y is this. And this is the expectation of max xj. This is very different than expected load of a particular bin. This is an expected load of of the max. Okay, and one can also show that expectation of y is blah blah blah. But let's see how we will go about proving. So we are going to do two things. We are going to combine Chernoff bound and union bound, which is powerful and general template. Okay, so you apply both Chernoff and union bound to do this. In what way? So we will focus on bin 1 and we'll say, look, the probability that bin 1 is not overloaded happens with good probability, and probability that no bin is overloaded is like number of bins times probability that you are not overloaded. That's it. And that is basically union bound. So first, let's try to focus on bin 1. And now, since bins are symmetric, we can just focus on only one bin. And now we have simplified the notation where x is the load of bin 1 and zeta is the indicator of ball I falling in bin. And we want to know what is the probability that x is greater than 10 ln n ln n. Okay, and we know that expectation of x is 1, right? Because recall, right? Probability that particular ball goes into one particular bin is 1 by n, and we have thrown n balls, so this is 1. So now 1 plus delta is equal to 10 ln n ln n, and we are in a large delta setting. So in large delta setting, we can apply Chernoff bound, and so the probability that x is greater than this quantity, you have to apply this particular kind of Chernoff bound. And if you substitute all this properly, you will get this. Like this is just a very simple, they just put it there, and do your computation, and you can show that a particular bin is more than this, more than 10 ln n by ln n is at most 1 over n cube. Now what can we say then? So for each bin j, probability that particular bin is more than some quantity is 1 over n cube. And let aj be the event that xj is greater than or equal to 10 ln n ln n. Now, what is the probability of union z? Like, what is the union aj? At least one bin is greater than 10 ln n ln n. This is exactly what this union bound is. Now, this is what we are interested to lower bound. But this is upper bounded by summation probability aj j, which is like n times n cube, which is 1 over n square. And we did why union bound is this, because aj is an event. Each of these guys are event. So you, in the right hand side, you're only summing the probabilities more. Like for some quantity, you could be summing for a1, a2, a3, many guys in the right side. But in the left hand side, you're only summing once. Hence, with probability at least 1 minus 1 by n squared, right? No bin has load more than 10 ln n ln n, right? What does it say? With probability at least 1 minus 1 by n squared, no bin is overloaded. And by overloaded, we mean this. Okay? So now what is y is we were interested in maximum j xj. I know that y is less than or equal to n, right? And again, as we did for the running time analysis, as I showed you for the quick shot, we can say, look, it can take these value. So up until now, it could have taken the best thing would have been just remove this 1 minus 1 by n squared. But I just you can be slightly more, but then because if you don't substitute this, then this will go, if you, if you put worse bound here, then you have to put worse bound here, better bound here, which is good for you. So for example, what will the worst case of this is that this quantity doesn't even exist. And then in that case, anyway, you have 10 ln n ln n, right? But yeah, so this happens with 1 minus, so this is your bound, and this is it happens with n, it takes n with probability 1 over n squared. So this tells us that expectation of y is basically centered around this quantity, okay? So what did we manage to show? We managed to show that expected maximum is no more than some ln n by ln n, okay? Or no bin is overloaded with, no bin contains more than this with very good probability. So in other words, you can say no bin contains more than these many balls with very good probability close to 1, okay? So there's something called story about two bins. So what you do is that at any point of time, you pick 2 bins, okay? And you put the ball in the bin which is less crowded, okay? And then you can show that no bin will contain more than order log n balls, okay? But that requires a very difficult analysis. We are not going to do that, okay? But that's so if you do a course in randomized algorithm, you get to prove. So here's a very simple variation of this. What did we do? We just randomly picked a bin and put the ball in the bin. But suppose we did the following: we picked 2 bin uniformly at random and put our ball in the bin which is less least occupied among these 2. And if both contains equal number of balls, just put it anyway. Then you can show that with very high probability, no bins contains more than log n balls. And we will see this also has very beautiful analog in how we deal with objects in big data, okay? Any questions? Hello? Okay. Okay, so let me do my last example, okay? And then we'll stop. Any question, Federer?
No, I just wanted to say that the time is already
okay, so we can
12:10.
Yeah, so we can do approx median next time. Okay. So, yes?
I have a question. So if we use instead of Chernoff upper bound, if we use lower bound, can we similarly prove some bound on minimum load?
Minimum load.
Will it also be the same factor?
A minimum load could be. What is the meaning of minimum load? Look, if I have n bins, okay, and n balls, whatever you do by pigeonhole principle, there will be a bin with at most 1 balls. It's a deterministic statement.
Yeah.
You get my point? So
yeah.
We cannot prove whether Chernoff or any bound to say that, well, expected load of particular bin will be more than some threshold. No, we cannot. We shouldn't be able to prove this. Right? Because no random experiment can give you things which cannot happen at all. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So look at the scenario, right? What is its probabilities and all these are doing? Because it's basically, so it's basically, think of this like, okay, I have n balls and I have n bins. You look at all functions from balls to the bins assignments, right? There is like, you get my point? What I mean by this? I have balls and I have bins. Look at a function which assigns balls to bins, right? So maybe many balls can go to the same bins, right? And for each such function, you can have a probability for getting that particular bin assignment with some probability.
Yeah.
Right? But there is no bin assignment. Like, so this is your omega. This is what possible bin assignments are, right? This is your omega. What is omega? Omega is all possible bin assignment of these balls, right? Now, there is no bin assignment here where you can, where you have some bin which is like where every bin is at least something. This is not there at all in my omega sample space, right? So if that object doesn't even exist in my sample space, we cannot show any probability about it. I cannot say that, look, at least like the minimum of all this will be that, okay, every bin will contain at least 2 balls. No, we cannot prove this. We can simply not prove this because there is no such assignment at all. Okay.
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
You get my point? But maybe if you say, if I threw 2 n balls, then maybe we can prove this. Maybe we threw 10 n balls, then maybe we can prove something of this nature.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, that's
right. Exactly.
I kind of meant that. Yeah.
Exactly. But in the setting when we have balls and bins are same, no, we shouldn't be able to prove.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay. Any more questions? So I just want to say only one thing. Look, so these are the only inequalities which we will use, and I would request people to just go browse through this. I'm not saying that you know this, but just browse through the kind of inequalities we apply, because we will be applying this inequality almost every lecture. Because, yeah, so this is why I gave the basics of this. We will also be applying an analysis like maximum load many times in the course. So it is good to see these things once, like just as an abstract object, right? And like if you do hashing and all, you do this balls and bins there all the time. That is basically hashing, and balls and bins examples are more or less similar. Okay. So I'll take break now. Okay. If you have any question, you can send me or email me. I'll reply to that. Okay. Otherwise, we'll meet on Wednesday and we'll see approximate median and quicksort and other things. I think we need 1.5 more lectures to do randomized algorithms, and then we'll be completely doing new examples in big data, like count sketch, min sketch, and things of this nature. Okay.